You live.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you very much for joining us at Bizpreneur today. We are streaming this second series of our Women Building Legacy series, and today we are going to be talking about authenticity, and joining me is Amina Mwaikambo. I will ask her to introduce herself formally and tell us exactly what it is that she does and what she's going to share with us today. And just a reminder, my name is Thobi Mazithulela, one of the career coaches at Bizpreneur. Welcome, everybody. And welcome, Amina.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Thobi, for having me. Thank you.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. I think, Amina, really, I would want you to just tell us a bit more about yourself, what it is that you do. I think I got quite a long list of, what exactly Amina is about, and walked out of there with a sense that, we're talking about a mental health guru. But please do share with everybody what exactly it is that you do.
Okay, well, so when you say mental health guru, people are going to be expecting like, I don't know what. But thank you so much for having me. I'm a counseling psychologist by profession. I'm currently working at an organization called CSVR, the Center for the Study of Violence and Reconciliation. And I'm an MHPSS practitioner there. So we work with different interventions at different levels, trying to ensure that, one, we're promoting mental health in different communities, but we also have different interventions that work with individuals and groups, and kind of ensuring that people have access to mental health support. Predominantly, we work with people who have experienced organized violence, so people who have experienced a war or different types of torture, and that's typically our population, and we provide interventions for them. And I'm also currently studying, so I'm starting to call myself an academic. So I'm currently working on my Ph.D. In psychology, and my main focus is on violence and torture, and I have a keen interest on the intersections of violence and inequality. So I'm passionate about promoting mental health awareness. I'm passionate about spreading the mental health gospel, and also for advocating against human rights violations. Yeah, that's me.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much for that, Amina. I think there's a lot of good work that you're doing out there, and a lot of work that takes emotion, that takes passion, and that just brings Amina, as you've described yourself, into the worldview. So when we talk about authenticity, is this the authentic you that's doing everything, or is it something that you've chosen along the way?
So people often ask me questions like, okay, so you're a psychologist, how did you get there? And I think sometimes I think that I chose the career, but I think the career chose me. I think because life has happened, life happens, and you learn how to negotiate different things, and you learn how to interact with people in a certain way. And I think when I eventually then went into psychology in terms of a profession, I started to see its value for me as a person. So I really value psychology from an individual perspective. And then I started to see its value in society, and how the practice of being a psychologist or a therapist helps to strengthen and helps to empower people to be healthier. So, I mean, obviously you're working in terms of mental health and mental illness, but then I think just kind of marrying and integrating the two has brought me to where I am now. So, I mean, even in terms of my career, I'm able to then say, this is where I want to go to with this, because that is what is leading me. That is where my passion is. Yeah.
Okay, no, thank you. Thank you. So talking about authenticity, I found a quote somewhere from Oscar Wilde that says, be yourself, everyone else is taken. Is this your belief? So how do you define what authenticity is actually?
So, I mean, if we're looking at somewhat of a dictionary definition, we'd say that authenticity is a quality. It's a quality of being genuine or true to yourself and the people around you or your various communities. But I think that, and I like how you're saying, is this what authenticity is to me? Authenticity is way bigger than just a word or its definition. Authenticity is in human experience. It is in character, its personality, its position, its status. Authenticity is understanding the self, it's freedom, it's the liberation to be oneself and exercise who you believe you are at any given season of your life.
Okay, that's an interesting one when you say, who you believe you are at any season. And I suppose for me, that begs the question, at any season, does one's authenticity change then? Is that the expectation? Does one have to adjust and be something else and still be authentic?
I mean, I think that if we're looking at authenticity as some sort of a rigid construct, then we're already boxing it. We are diverse people, we're complex people. So if we're looking at it from that perspective, like this is my authentic self, then we're kind of missing it, because we are always going to grow and we're always going to shift. And it's always about just kind of reflecting on yourself. So who am I in this time? What does it mean for me in this time? This is why sometimes people might have a vision to be something, and then they might be taking a backseat at a particular time. It's not because they don't see themselves as a visionary. They're maybe looking at the different stages, and in that moment, they are being authentically themselves because they know where they are at that particular time and what that is doing for them.
No, thank you. And why is it important for us to actually talk about authenticity, especially in the present times? Why are we having those conversations about that?
I mean, because of the complexity of it. And I mean, based on what we've already kind of discussed, having a knowing of this, we're able to then appreciate where we are and what we're doing at any given point. To appreciate that we're all a work in progress, which is very important. We've seen the pressures that we have in society to show up and be there and all of that. And normally when we see people who have arrived, we see this perfect picture, whereas nobody is perfect and nobody can actually achieve perfection. But we can allow ourselves to explore the meanings behind our visions for ourselves and then for the people around us in the communities that we want to impact. So from that perspective, as women, maybe looking even at Women's Month or women building legacies, we have to be able to explore authenticity so that we're not reaching for something that looks like someone else. We're reaching for something that we're able to then attain for ourselves.
So you've introduced something that maybe a lot of us talk about in the age where there's so much content online that we consume, so much sharing of lifestyles and, what I'm doing today, what so-and-so is doing tomorrow. And how do we then live through that and still maintain that authenticity, still maintain not being an imposter, thinking I can be like Amina if I just do the things that I see her do online. I don't see what she does in the background, but try to emulate whatever it is that Amina's doing. So those under pressure there, how do they try and maintain that? Maintain themselves or their authenticity rather?
I think if we're looking at how we don't lose maybe a sense of authenticity. I mean, look, as women, we're never just fighting one battle. We're fighting the battle within. We're fighting the battle of the systems. We're fighting the battle of the sister who's doing better than us, the battle of how we should behave and when. So it's easy to forget who we are in order to get things done. And it's easy to forget who we are in order to be seen or heard. And sometimes this then causes us to trample on others in order to kind of like take up space, because you're seeing the space that somebody else is taking and you're like, I want this. So we shouldn't have to trample on each other. Honestly, it shouldn't be like that. So we lose our sense of authenticity when we get caught up in stuff that has nothing to do with us. And that's not to say that you focus solely on what's in it for you and ignore the rest of the world. No. I mean, I really love this talk on allyship. I think it was during the first episode of this series. It made me personally just think about when I've ignored the plight of others because I guess they didn't directly affect me, or that's what I thought. And it made me remember that things don't always affect me directly, but if they affect people who look like me, then they do affect me indirectly. And if I'm involving myself in that to a certain extent, it's reminding me of who I am and where I'm from. And that's one of the places where we can, relocate that sense of authenticity. So yes, I know I'm digressing. Minding your business is very important. Being all over the place can be very destructive. Exploring different people and spaces can be really good for you. Seeing what's happening on Instagram or whatever, going to webinars, whatever it is, that can be really good for your development and for healthy progression. But one needs to be disciplined enough to be able to go back to the self and ask, why did I start? Where am I? Why am I here? And what's in it for me? And remembering that, even that question, what's in it for me, can be a stepping stone for a legacy in whichever sector that you want to be able to positively impact or influence.
No, something to take away there, minding one's own business and really asking, whether what they're doing is going to build that legacy. I think very important advice that Amina has shared with us. And to those that are viewing us or, listening to us, we are welcoming any questions, any comments that you may have on this topic around authenticity. And I will, pass those questions on to Amina as we go along. So just to continue with our discussion, Amina, how do we then build the courage, actually? Now we've got it outlined. You need to mind your business. You need to to ignore whatever, sometimes, ignore whatever's happening around you. Focus on the self, focus on what you need to do and what your goals are. But is there a way that women can actually build courage to really become their true selves?
So I would say it's in two parts. One is to look within, and two is to look around you. As I mentioned before, authenticity has to do with being able to look and see what's happening, not just what's happening within you. One of the things about finding a mentor, for example, you see somebody, you see something amazing, and why you are able to be inspired by that person is because there's something in them that you see, but you see it as something that's attainable to you. So in a way, you're seeing something in them that you see in yourself, and that has to do with relatability. And if you're able to look at it like that, from that perspective as well, you're able to then say that, oh, okay, there is an element of greatness within me as well, which is why I can look at Thobi and be like, oh, wow, look at this, look at these qualities, because you relate. I relate to you. And then you can take that and then say, okay, so there's part of me as well that I see in that greatness. And so, for example, then that tells you something about yourself. Looking within means that you're able to open up to introspection. You're able to engage in personal development. You're able to acknowledge your strengths and your weaknesses. So this is all about what's happening internally. And after being open to some of those processes, you can then take it further and actually then start to build on them. And then the second one that I mentioned about looking around you. So that means that you're actually taking stock of who you're associating with and how your environment is speaking to you and how it's treating you. So for example, do you have safe spaces where you can be vulnerable? Do you have people who you trust with your vulnerability? Are there people you're able to learn with? And this isn't always people who are on the same level as you, there's that saying, something about eagles and chickens, and if you're an eagle, don't sit with chickens or something like that. Oh, I mean, in my opinion, that's a little bit of hogwash, because we can't only associate with people who have gone before us, because everyone we meet, wherever we are, is an opportunity for learning. There have to be some people that have gone before you, some at the same level as you, and some who you have gone before or ahead of. And through this, you're able to then imagine or anticipate what the future you will experience. You're able to then reflect with others at your own level, and you're able to support or learn from, and even empathize, with those who haven't reached where you are. And I think one of the valuable parts of the latter relationship, so this is people who have come after you, is that you will also be able to then see parts of yourself in them And then that can also help you to be able to be kind of that version of yourself that didn't know all the fancy things that you know now. And I mean, what legacy will you actually be able to build if you're not cognizant of the people or the experiences of those people that are coming after you, you know? So I think building courage from within and being able to then go and see what's happening around me, looking within and being able to look without, that will help you to then start to explore, you know, your own sense of authenticity.
No, thank you, Amina. I think what we can take away from there is just having or conducting rather a very honest analysis of who we are as people. So you mentioned that look at yourself inward and you know, all the strengths that you have, look at all the weaknesses as well, just be cognizant of who you are as a person, and then also look at the environment that you're operating in, and acknowledging that every single person that you meet has a purpose, whether they've gone before you, whether they somebody that looks up to you, whether it's your peers, there's something to be learned from there. I think that's advice a lot of people will appreciate. Then we would like to know as well how it is that women in any space or in any sphere can actually overcome the need to sort of please others and fit in. I think we live in a world that has so many opinions, what we should be doing, when we should be doing it, when certain things need to happen. And you find that then we adapt ourselves or want to tailor ourselves around those ideas or those pressures from society. So how do we then hold, you know, or rather be steadfast in who we are and actually just do away with the need to want to fit into the ideals of everybody else?
Yeah, that one is a big one. So I mean, we often speak about people pleasing, and just as a disclaimer, I'd like to say that people pleasing is on a spectrum. It's not like people pleasers, non-people pleasers. There's a healthy measure of pleasing others that we all need to be able to engage in, because relationships are about give and take, or they're about compromise and sharing. So all those nice things that make our social spaces, you know, run smoothly. However, there is a level of people pleasing that is very unhealthy, where we don't have boundaries and we struggle to prioritize ourselves or our health or our ambitions. And even something like where we struggle to ask ourselves questions like what's in it for me, you know? So overcoming the need to please others or fit in, firstly involves a level of self-reflection. Learn how to do self-introspections. Ladies, and the guys who are watching, learn how to self-introspect. This is not just about picking out your flaws or seeing what you're good at and ignoring the rest. This may mean things like checking who you are and why you behave a certain way in certain environments. If you generally struggle with self-introspection, try writing down your thoughts and emotions, especially when you're having maybe a difficult week or a difficult day. You can also then find, you know, or create healthy spaces with people you trust or who you've known in different phases of your life, or who are maybe in similar situations or phases as you, and normalize talking about real life experiences, because then that will pick out, okay, so in this environment, I don't really fit, but what's causing me to want to fit there? But the most important thing, I think, when we're looking at why people please and how we want to fit in, is looking at the self and being intentional about you. So I know I said self-introspection, and I was like, yeah, we should all be able to self-introspect. And to tell the truth, some people don't have as much insight to be able to do that. So if you do need to do that, you can kind of speak to a professional. I always say that if you have access to a professional, please use it. You don't need to wait for a crisis in your life to have an understanding of how to manage a life crisis. So kind of going back to the question about why you may have a need to fit in, there'll be different answers for different people. However, try find out for yourself. Introspection may mean checking how you feel about certain people and why. Some of those answers you already do have internally. Is it about you? Is it about them? I mean, there's a fine line between admiring, for example, and being jealous. And that line typically has to do with like self-worth and self-identity. So how do you value yourself? And then how do you value yourself in relation to others? This part really speaks to that, that kind of becoming your authentic self. And when you're there, then you can see that, okay, here, this relationship is not really serving me the way it needs to serve me. And I'm going to put a boundary there. Or this environment doesn't fit for me. So I'm going to move myself out of it because it's just not working. And you can trust yourself enough to be able to go there and be fine with it.
Okay, thank you. And I just want to add another layer to that question, Amina. When we talk about having boundaries and self-worth and just knowing the self, is it something that someone can acquire at later stages in their life, or is it something that should have been cultivated from an early age? What are your thoughts on that? Actually, I don't think there's one answer that will make sense completely. But what are your thoughts on that?
So, I mean, we live in an information age. There's so much information. Where we have our shortfalls, we attend a webinar, we're here. There's a Women in Legacy series. You check in, you make sure you're there, you buy some books, you listen to people, you get a life coach, you find a mentor, you do whatever it is that you need to do in order to become empowered. Honestly speaking, if we're looking at a lot of our family settings, a lot of family settings don't have the building blocks that we need in order to develop some of these things. So even things like boundaries, boundaries are a big thing. And sometimes we have unconscious difficulties that prevent us from being able to set healthy boundaries, some of it from developmental periods or whatever it is, right? But if you're now then saying in this information age, I hear this word about boundaries, then go and find out, Google boundaries. What are boundaries? What do boundaries mean to me? Boundaries in relationships, boundaries in the workplace, But these are things you don't have to have. I think sometimes people do struggle when they feel like, okay, but how come this person's got it so together and I don't? If you feel like you don't have it together, then go and figure out what it is that you want to have together. Get information. And I know people are like, yeah, Google is not the answer to everything, but Google answers a lot of questions. If you don't have access to professionals or mentors or a coach or something like that, if you don't have access, get a book, read something, have a sense of understanding. Connect with people, have conversations. But these are things that we can then use to make sure that we build ourselves. So we have those tools that we need. Yeah.
Thank you, Amina. I think you gave us really good pointers there, particularly about people pleasing and the fact that, well, there's not much that's wrong with it, but it's just how and when it comes about, and also the importance of having boundaries. And you've added that layer of, if you don't know what boundaries are, or what your own are, you can actually read up on it, get opinions from elsewhere, and really think about what it is that you would like to set boundaries on. And of course, self-introspection. This is a theme that has come up in your responses before. And also that connectedness or seeking help. Seeking opinions from professionals. And I suppose that I need to be clear about what professionals are in this case. Are we talking about individuals like yourself who are psychologists, or the practicing people? Are we talking about coaches and mentors only? What are who are the professionals that you mean?
So I mean, that one's a sticky one because, and it's a sticky one because people are very protective over their professional names. So I'm not really going to answer that question only because of that. So I don't want to say something then someone is like, no, but you shouldn't. Look, there are different types of professionals that work in human development. Let's put it like that, right? So I can speak from a psychological perspective that I know that a psychologist works within these parameters, right? But even psychologists work very differently. So, they're interested in different things. They specialize in different things. They work differently with people. So what I would then say is, if you are going to connect with a professional, one, find out about their credentials, because that's very important. So that when you know that you're speaking to a psychologist, you're speaking to a psychologist, and this is what you get out of them. Another thing that I'd say to people is, guys, don't be afraid to ask questions, you know? If
Yes.
somebody asked me for my registration, I would give them, like I'd show them my registration because I have it, you know? So when you're looking for a professional, whether it's a coach, whether it's a therapist, whether it's a mentor, whether it's a psychologist, ask the questions, ask, okay, so what is that you do? This is what I want. And it always has to be about that. There has to be that sense of openness, because remember that if you're trusting somebody with your life, like you need to know who you're trusting, you need to know why you're trusting them. And so part of their career, so like, let's say, for example, if you come to me and I'm a psychologist, one, you're relying on the field of psychology as a sector or a, you know, a career or profession, you know, and then you're relying on me secondary to that, you know. So find out who you're speaking to, ask all the questions that you need. But I would recommend somebody who has experience in human development in whichever sector. So if it's a coach, if it's some sort of a therapist, if it's a psychologist, if it's a mentor, whoever it is, you know, just make sure that you kind of know what are they doing. And you're allowed to ask for credentials. You absolutely are.
Okay. No, good. Thank you for that. I think you have given some insight, at least, though, even if the question was a bit of a tough one to answer, you have given some insight. And yes, people do ask for credentials if you need to, once you've identified where exactly it is that you need assistance from. I'm just going to go to a question, or rather it's a comment. Bridget Balingwe, one of the ladies that's watching us, says, wow, you always have a way of putting things into perspective beautifully, Amina. Keep up the good work. I have never thought about it like that. Seeing something and admiring something from someone means that there's something inside of you that is as great as what you see in others, that enables you to relate. That's a powerful insight. That's a comment from Bridget. Yes. And then we've also got a question from T. Mandy, or is it a comment? Says, good evening, ladies. Can the two, looking within you and around you, be done simultaneously? Okay, that's a question for you, actually. We did mention in one of, or rather in one of your responses, that one has to, look within, and then also the environment that they operate or live in. So can the two be done simultaneously? Team Mandy would like to know.
Absolutely, because we don't lock ourselves in and then go outside. We're constantly negotiating who we are and how other people are, you know? So whenever you're thinking about yourself, you're always thinking about yourself in terms of your individual self, then you're thinking about yourself in context, right? So let's say, for example, if it was a job interview, they would ask you, what are your qualities? You know, what would you bring to the environment? What kind of environment do you fit in? And that's to be able to get some sort of insight into what kind of a fit are you? So we need to be able to do that ourselves as well. We need to be able to say that, okay, so typically my personality is not so much towards extroversion. So I'm not going to go and associate myself all the time or in big spaces with a lot of extroverts, because then I'm going to have clashes. Is there something wrong with extroverts? No. I know that I'm an introvert. So I might be more drawn towards introverts, because we can all kind of be in the same space and work internally. So it's about that kind of thing, being able to say that, okay, there's me and then there's others. And just because I'm a certain way doesn't mean that there's something wrong with everybody else. Just constant negotiating self and others, and being able to be as open with yourself, you know, about different things. So let's say, for example, if you're in an environment that's very toxic, so we like to say things like toxic environments. But it's an environment that's very toxic. And I know some people are going to be like cringing when I say this, but do you know that there's something within us that sometimes draws us into toxic environments? Or even if it doesn't draw you there, it keeps you there, you know? So even if you get into the environment and it seemed like it was fine, then you find that, there's something wrong here. There's something that's within us that kind of compels us to stay. And those are the things when you say looking within and looking without, then you're like, okay, I see the environment is toxic. I see what it's doing to me. I see what's happening there. I'm still here. Why am I still here? What's happening? Can I leave? Should I leave? So it's always like the kind of negotiating internal world and external world at the same time.
Mm-hmm. And I suppose answering those questions truthfully as well. Why are you still there? Some people are fixers. They like to be where there's chaos because there's glory.
Right.
If one can answer
Absolutely.
that question and say, I just like the idea that someone's going to be very happy I fixed something, then say so. But obviously, as you've said, if it's not serving you really, then make the shift or be prepared to make the shift. Thank you very much for answering Team Andy's question.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I just want to know as well, if authenticity is something that can be lost, so how do we lose it? How? I think there are people who will comment and say, I don't feel like myself. How do we lose authenticity?
So, I mean, if we look at, for example, if we go back to this previous question now, and you're asking yourself, I thought this was me, but here I am now. So I think the toxic environment and the being the fixer is a very good example, right? So even fixers are okay, right? Because there's something about you that feels empowered when you're able to support others, right?
Yes.
But when you get to a point where you're now not doing what you genuinely wanted to do, that's when you're starting to shift away from yourself, right? And that's when you then start to find yourself doing things that you don't particularly want to do, or you don't particularly need to do, or things that make you question like your own integrity, So like I was saying in the beginning, authenticity is not just a dictionary definition. It's about character. It's about personality. It's about integrity. It's about drive. It's about so many things that make you who you are at different points in your life. So oftentimes we do lose like that sense of self when we find ourselves in situations which are not necessarily serving us. And then we're just kind of molding into what the environment is asking of you. So if I'm seeing that Thobi is doing something really great and I like it, and I'm not honest enough with myself to say that I'm appreciating her and I'm going to appreciate her in her fullness. So I'm in a place where I feel dissatisfied with myself. Excuse me. I'm going to then start looking at that thing that I admire in you and trying to like pull off it, but from a very negative place. And then that starts to make me ingenuine. And then that starts to make me somewhat inauthentic. Because what am I doing now? I'm not seeing that quality in you that I think is great. I'm seeing that quality in you, and I'm seeing how I want it. So already I want it from you in the way it looks through you, not in the way that it's going to look through me or how it will be expressed through me. So that's one of the ways I think that people typically then start to lose that sense of authenticity, shifting away from self, being in the wrong kind of sense of self and kind of peace of mind. And I know that does sound quite cliche, but the truth of the matter is that when you don't have a sense of rest, and you're not satisfied with yourself, it becomes very easy to then shift away or want something that is elsewhere, instead of then saying, why am I not satisfied with myself? What is causing me this dissatisfaction?
Thank you. Again, the theme of being honest with oneself comes in how you answer the questions that come up. So that is something for all of us to consider. And
absolutely.
That begs the question as well, why is overcoming that inauthenticity so hard? Is inauthenticity a word actually? But I hope that question makes sense. So why is overcoming that lack of authenticity, let me say, so hard?
Because then we have to have these hard conversations with ourselves, because then I have to then say, what am I lacking? Why do I feel dissatisfied? It's hard. It's hard to then kind of go within yourself and then be like, I have done. So let me bring it to self a little bit. So I've I've got a master's degree, right, in psychology. Look at me struggling to say that. Got a master's degree in psychology, right? And when I embarked on this career and I registered to become a psychologist, I had an idea of what I wanted, right? And then over here, someone says, hey, try this, hey, try that, hey, try this, you know? And then if I move in a direction, maybe that says that, oh, if you go in that direction, there's going to be more money, there's going to be more this, you know? I'm moving in a direction that is not aligned with me, right? So I'm moving in a direction which is suggested to me by something that's external. I'm not able to then sit with myself and say, girl, are you chasing money? Is that what you're doing? Excuse me. If I'm not able to then go there and ask myself that question and then say, yeah, I'm chasing money, then I'm not being authentic. So if I keep going around making lots of excuses for myself, things that are so, removed from my sense of alignment, then when it comes time to come back and go and check, okay, so how did you get here? I'll say it was Thobi's fault. I will say it was so-and-so's fault, and I'll be able to bring all of those things, but I'm still not being real with myself. I'm still not acknowledging what I contributed to this. I'm still not then coming back to the source, which needs me to go to in order to then be able to say, this is how I'm going to overcome this sense of being, is it disingenuous? I think that's the word, or inauthentic. You can't tell me how to be authentic. I need to know, I need to be able to look within. You can empower me, you can give me 10 tips to whatever, can write a book, but if I'm not able to reflect on that, and I'm not able to contextualize it to my own experiences, then I will always be reaching for something else. I'll always be looking at somebody else and wanting things for myself, and then not feeling like a sense of fulfillment. And then coming back from that is very difficult.
Yeah, thank you for that response. And as you were speaking, I was just thinking as well about how we get to a point of lacking authenticity, again, because we want to please people, or we're certain environments that, or we are in certain environments that really require us to adapt or behave a certain way. And being someone who sometimes works off a lot of lists and wanting to schedule things, do you think it's a good idea that somebody just once a week has time to sit and actually think about, what's happened in their space and how they can, be more of themselves in any space? Or is that too much pressure?
The things, you never not have time for yourself, because you wake up within yourself, you shower within yourself, you draw your eyebrows within yourself, you go to work. We always have time for self. We always have time for self. We just end up getting distracted, which is fine, because we must still work. We must still do all the things that we need to do, right? So I've heard a lot of people say things like, hey, there's no time for this introspection stuff. It's too deep or whatever. But we're running no matter what. We're moving. And it's always, I always say that, yes, granted, we are living in a very fast-paced world. There is so much that's happening. But you do have some moments when you can just be like, okay, I feel triggered. I feel tired. I feel happy. I feel calm. Those moments, you take stock of them. That's what like practicing like mindfulness is. How am I feeling in this moment? What am I thinking in this moment? And it allows you, it's something that you then start to do more naturally. So, like when you start to drive a car, for example, then learn, press the clutch, then release a little bit. So it's very thought through, it's very mechanical, right? Then at some point you're driving a car and you're drinking coffee and on the phone and putting on lipstick, okay. And you're not doing all of those things when you're driving. But you know how it just becomes like, you can just do it without thinking about it. So even like the taking time out to think about yourself and experience how your environment is making you feel and how you're feeling, and noticing a lot of those things. When you practice it more, it becomes so much more natural. It doesn't have to be this big event, it can just be like, oh, okay, I walked out of that meeting and I don't feel so good about myself. And then even if you notice that, when you do get a moment, you can go back and say, why didn't I feel good about myself? I prepared, I delivered. Oh, it was that person's look, you know? But then you're able to then start to think about yourself more deeply, and you're able to then say, okay, fine. And that is what, when I say sometimes people don't have as much insight, that is when you're then able to get, you know, a deeper sense of insight about yourself, for example.
Mm-hmm. Okay, no, thank you. Thank you. I suppose one of the other things that actually crosses my mind then in that is, yes, you can make the time, practice self-awareness, mindfulness, you know, ensure that you are very present when it comes to what it is that you feel, what you think at any given time, and just how others reacted or the responses that you're getting from your environment. And sometimes though, we do hit a wall where our authentic selves are not accepted. And how do we deal with that?
Yeah, so people will not always like you.
Mm.
Adulting will teach you that people will not always like you. And they will not always like you for different reasons. Sometimes it's not even about you. Sometimes it is, yes. But sometimes it's not even about you. Sometimes it's because they don't like the way you speak or you look or you sound or whatever. Sometimes they're threatened by you, you know. But I think for me, what I always and kind of hold is that people will not always like me. And that's their right, you know. So your authentic self won't always be accepted everywhere, but your authentic self will be accepted in some places. Use them, capitalize on them, you know. Sometimes we run away from the people who honor us so much and they value us so much and they see us so much. We run because we're chasing something else. And when we chase that something else in that space that doesn't particularly regard you as very highly, then we project and we're like, these people don't like my authentic self. But why are you still staying there? You know, why are you still staying there? What are you doing there? And you know what? I'm not saying that it's easy to just kind of snap out of spaces. No, I'm also not saying let's be impulsive and say, oh, okay, they don't like me here, peace, I'm out. No, again, ask yourself, why am I still here? What's happening here? Because I can tell that I don't fit and they're not really appreciating me. How is this serving me? And then you're able to then say, okay, over here, they accept me the way I am. They promote me the way I am. They honor me. They see me. They value me. They validate me. Why am I running here? How is this serving me? And I think when you're able to then just kind of be honest with yourself about why you're in different spaces, you're already much more empowered to then know what to do next. So yes, we will be in spaces sometimes where they really don't appreciate you. And sometimes that's a stepping stone. We don't just always have to like ditch, like toxic environments, ditch, toxic people, ditch. No, even that kind of, that narrative can be problematic, you know?
Yes. Cancel
Sometimes
culture.
you have to sit inside the trench where they don't see you. You're like, I'm great. And they're like, you're not, you know? Sometimes you need to sit inside the trench and you need to know, why am I here? And you're the person who will give yourself that answer. If it's a stepping stone, then you're like, okay, this is my stepping stone. And that's where you find, like, even when you're finding yourself feeling conflicted, you're able to contain yourself. You're able to comfort yourself and say, girl, 6 more months, just 6 more months. And we do, guys, we know how to do this thing. We sometimes act like we don't, but we do. If you've ever done a degree, I'm yet to meet the person who loved the process. I'm yet to meet that person. In that process, you can feel inadequate. You can feel like you're just not getting it. You can feel like this thing is tearing apart your organs, but you're there because you're like, this is just a season. This is what I'm doing to take me to where I need to go to. But when you're able to then say, okay, fine, I'm really struggling right now, but this is part of the process, then you're able to then say, okay, that's fine. Whether people see you or they don't see you or they validate your struggles or not, you're able to then say, it's fine for them to not see me. I know where I'm going to with this, you know, and then you're still being genuine to yourself. You're not selling yourself out. You're just looking at the greater goal.
Yeah, I guess constantly adapting yourself is tiresome as well. I really like what you've just shared, because it's really about having that courage to say, well, this is who I am. Accept me the way that I am, and I'm going to what I've come to do and move on. It actually brings to mind a quote. I don't even know who said this, or it's just a meme that's flying around on social media that says, go where you are accepted, not tolerated. And I think that's something that you alluded to as well, to say, well, gravitate towards the ones that actually make sense for you. And if at that time it's not convenient for you to make the shift, then work with what's there, but know, what the end goal is, why you are actually there. We have another question that has come from one of the ladies that is viewing. Natasha Patsika says, to what extent does, sorry, I have to say Natasha Netta actually, it says, to what extent does our authentic self evolve over time as you navigate the various seasons of your life? And I think this is a question that will come from any individual, just, our experience as women growing up as little girls and their expectations going through school, those that went on to tertiary and, who you were then the expectations again of, finding a partner, becoming mothers for those who could, and whatever achievements along the way. So Natasha's question really speaks to what extent being yourself or being authentic evolves as you navigate those seasons of life.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely love that question, because sometimes we think about authenticity as a destination. As long as you're growing and you're developing and you're shifting and you're moving, you're transitioning, how you experience yourself is always going to shift as well, So authenticity is not like this destination, it's a process. We're always transitioning, we're always finding ourselves, if you look at being a little girl to being an adult, being a little girl, maybe what was authentic to you. I mean, and for example, I've had that kind of feedback that I'm much more reserved now as an adult, whereas as a child, I was all over the place, And I'm wondering, why was I all over the place? Because that's so not me now, right? But that was me then, when I was being genuine, I wasn't trying something, because 4-year-olds are typically not out there trying to, I don't know, they're just being themselves, they're being whoever they are, So it is going to change. We are going to shift. We are going to transition. And it's just about finding that, those questions, and they do sound like a lot, like, who am I? Why am I here? What am I doing here? How am I being fulfilled? How is this serving me? Those questions are important to come back to from time to time, because then you're always kind of gauging like that level of authenticity. I don't know, I've come across these people. Sometimes when our relationships end and someone is like, you've changed so much. Yeah. Yes. It's a natural progression of life. We change. We don't want to stay the same. We want to grow. And I mean, okay, fine. Obviously, there's negative change, yes. But this idea of that you have to be the same person all the time, you don't. You can change. You can be a person here and a different person somewhere else, and you can still be genuine. Maybe because Thobi makes me feel comfortable being like this, whereas somebody else doesn't make me feel comfortable being like that. It doesn't mean I'm being fake. It means that for me, the thing that is a priority now is to be able to navigate this space and that space. It's not two-facedness. We're not talking about negative things like conduct and whatever. No, we're just talking about yourself when you bring yourself into different spaces. So even with time, being a certain person a certain way and presenting yourself or expressing yourself a certain way and doing something different or presenting yourself differently at a different time doesn't mean that you've shifted so much and now inauthentic. It just means that you've transitioned. And sometimes the transition can be in terms of time, and it can be a lateral transition or whatever it is. But always going back to those questions again, why am I doing this? What is it serving for me? Who am I looking out for? How do I want this to follow me? Will I be okay if I look back, in 5 years' time? Will I be okay? Will I understand why I was that person? For me, that's what this is most about.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I hope Natasha got that response. And I suppose what we can take away from that is that those seasons will be there. There will be times when you really need to focus on yourself and the changes that have happened and how you stay true to yourself. And I think adding to that is just taking along those who understand then those changes, because that's what happens. I think a lot of us become quite guilty, when it comes to the changes we need to make internally, and when it comes out, it's as if you are trying to leave people along the way, which is not the truth, really. It's just I've changed and that's it. And staying true to yourself will mean that moving along sometimes without those you've worked with for quite a while. So thank you very much, Amina, for that response. And to just go to the final question that I had, it's how quickly one can develop authenticity. Is there a timeline to it, actually?
I don't think so. I think authenticity is like fine wine. Okay, I'm kidding. I'm not kidding. Authenticity is something that you allow to happen, and like I said before, it's not a destination. We're not just like, I am authentic. We're constantly reflecting. We're constantly allowing ourselves to look at ourselves, look within, look without. Sometimes you meet people who inspire you or show you something different, and maybe if that speaks to you, then you can lean in that direction. I think a lot of times when people struggle with this idea of being authentic, it's about then being inside this box, So I don't think it's a short process. I don't think there's like a quick way. So like I'm saying, there's no book that will then say this and then you cram it and then you're good to go. No, this is about adaptation. It's about process. It's a lot of it is about like a level of self-respect also, and respecting wherever you are at any given time. And sometimes that does take time. So it's about being able to pace yourself, so sometimes if I look at somebody and I feel like this person is absolutely amazing and I love who they are and I love the way they bring themselves out and that kind of thing, I should be able to pace myself and say, this quality, I want it too, right? But I'm prepared to respect myself enough to work my way towards that. And even while you're working towards that, maybe you'll be like, no, actually, no, it doesn't serve me. And you let it go, So it's always about process and it's about pacing yourself. It's not about the stuff that we see like on social media or when we see Oprah and we're like, I just want to be like, it's not about that. It's absolutely not about that. It's about taking time. And like what I said before about you see somebody and you see that quality in them and you're like, I love this. But because it relates to you, then you're able to say, okay, fine, I love this, but how do I cultivate this within me? And we don't just cultivate over a short period of time. We have to be able to embrace process, embrace ourselves, be nice to ourselves, and pace ourselves appropriately.
Thank you. And it's quite a good lesson, I think, to learn for all of us. For those that have been listening, you heard the themes that came along as Amina was, talking to us. The fact that we have to do some self-introspection. We need to answer those questions that come up as honestly as we can. We need to identify the areas of development, the areas where, that may need some other intervention. She did mention even approaching professionals to help you. Those professionals could be a psychologist, it could be a life coach, career coach, anything that will help you sort of streamline what it is that you want to do to ensure that you reach that level of understanding of the self. And also, we've covered everything about the changes in life as well and how one maintains being themselves along the way. I think she shared quite a good bit about that. So we're very, very grateful to Amina for what you've shared today. Is there anything that you'd want to say in closing to everyone that's listening? I know that the messages yes, focused on Women's Month and women, but I know that we're talking to, everybody as well, just about authenticity and what they need to do going forward to really achieve that level of knowing the self and being comfortable in presenting the self to everybody else.
Yeah, so thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting me over today to kind of share about this. I mean, the one thing that I do want to say, even as I'm coming in a professional perspective, is that we're all learning. I'm learning too. You know, we all learn. There's nobody who has like the highest level of knowing. And in our learning, we learn about others and we learn about ourselves, you know. So there isn't necessarily, you know, that there's that. We live in a world where there's this race and we're constantly like running towards something. And when we're constantly running, we tend to leave ourselves behind, you know. So I'd just like to say to everybody, thank you so much for listening today, but just to also remember that even as you listen to others, they're still learning, you know. I personally still have some of my own insecurities. I also have my spaces where I say, so why are you there? Like, what are you doing? Like, what's in it for you? It's like, how is this serving you? Have you shifted? How are you out of alignment? You know, those are things that I practice myself because I've seen the value in them. So if you are kind of feeling like, you know, after listening to all of this today, you're just like, where do I even start? We're all constantly starting somewhere. I don't feel like anybody has arrived, even Oprah. We're looking at, you know, amongst the people who have lived and done the things, there are spaces in their lives that they have to keep going back and checking on themselves, you know. And even if you feel like, and this is something that I particularly have loved, for example, about being an academic and working with people, or being a therapist and working with people, there's so much that you learn from others, from their lived experiences, and how real they can be in situations and spaces that if somebody else looks at it, it's like, no, that's not where I want to be. But how genuine they can be and how real they can be, and how they're able to kind of find a space where they own their lived experiences and they own themselves, and that's okay for them. So just to kind of say that, you know what, guys, we're all constantly learning, and there's no superior person that you'll ever become. You know, there'll still be somebody somewhere that you can learn from. And if we can hold on to that, I think that we'll do quite well with ourselves.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you very much, Amina, for sharing your knowledge and that wisdom with us, reminding us that life is a journey, that we are all on, you know, separate paths, and the fact that we just keep moving, learning and understanding that there's nothing or no one that is really above you as an individual. It's just a matter of where they fit in. I think that's a very important to live with everybody. So I must thank you very much for joining us and for helping us close off our series on, you know, women in leadership roles, or women as legacy builders on a bank. Well, closing it off well, sorry, mumbled my words there. And I just want to thank everybody who's joined us throughout the series and the people that are here today. And we're looking forward to the next installment. I'm sure we'll be able to share with you when that will be. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a good night. Thank you, Amina, for joining us, and all the best.
Thank you.